Hello and welcome. I'm Jessie Chahel. Today we look at the wider aspects of the current flood crisis. Jasbir Kaur, the Vice President of the Gurdwara Sahib Petaling Jaya, joins me to talk about feeding part of Keluarga Malaysia, who are currently facing another unprecedented crisis. Also, organizational psychologist Hital Doshi fills us in on the psychological first aid in a crisis. And Anthony Lee, the chairman of Persatuan Insurance Arm Malaysia, gives us some info on insurance, especially during the floods. That and more coming up shortly. This is The Brief. Right now, I'd like to move to Hital Doshi, who's going to join us to talk a little bit more about psychological aid and some of the relief that is needed by the people at this point of time. Hital, thanks for joining us. How would you describe the state of the nation right now as it tries to deal with compounding crises and disasters, and that too from a psychological perspective, Hital?
Thanks, Jessie, for having me. I think, the saying, when it rains, it pours, really goes hand in hand with Murphy's Law of anything that can go wrong will go wrong. We've had at least two major crises happening concurrently. And in one word, I would describe the experience of Malaysians as in a state of psychological and emotional pain. Pain that is poorly experienced and managed turns into suffering, but pain that is managed with adequate skills, knowledge, and resources can be turned into possibilities for progressing an entire nation. So I really, hope strongly that we begin to, as a nation, look into pain as not something that is poorly managed into suffering, but something that can be managed very proactively towards more possibilities of progressing as a collective.
Right. So in the midst of what's going on now as well, we know that the Menteri Besar of Selangor will be giving us a press conference in just a short while. We don't know what his messages are or what he'll be saying, but we want to just tell our viewers to stay tuned. Hital, in the midst of a crisis right now that's unfolding, and as we try and get more aid out there and relief efforts are underway as well, what can the government, the organization and communities do? What extra can we do right now so that everyone collectively continues to remain resilient, especially for those who are vulnerable at this time?
I truly think that going forward, we should take a more proactive approach, because as the world experiences a faster pace, more challenges and changes, a proactive approach would be much better. So while rescue workers and communities right now may be trained to provide physical first aid to deal with emergencies and crises, it is also important for all of us, every single one of us in the community, not to necessarily rely on the government or on volunteers or organizations, but all of us in the community to be equipped with psychological first aid so that we can take care of ourselves and take care of others during difficult times. In Singapore, for example, the vision is to ensure that every single household or every single workplace team or every single building has somebody that is equipped with both physical and psychological first aid. This really encourages Malaysia to become a more resilient society that not only bounces back when need be, but bounces forward very quickly after a crisis.
That's right. So what you're saying perhaps, Hital, is maybe at this point of time there could be little tents or kiosks or different areas set up where relief is being provided as well, to help counsel or provide some psychological relief to people?
100%, yes. We could definitely create a lot more tents and opportunities where people can get that experience of psychological safety. However, it is really important that this is a skill that everybody has, so that you do not have to go to a specific place to get that. Most people who are undergoing any kind of crisis, they tend to express how they're feeling to the ones that are closest to them. They don't really want to approach a particular station or an outlet to begin to express how they're feeling. So, just like how we would pour out to a best friend, it is always very valuable that all of us are equipped to help the person next to us in difficult times.
Right. Okay. So what you're saying is, and what I'm hearing is that time is crucial, of course. The quicker that help can be accessible to the victims, the better, and the better for the entire well-being of the family as well. Hital, what are some of the immediate things we should do, and perhaps also not do, if we find someone who's been psychologically affected or impacted, even if one is not a psychologist?
Right. You can use the ASSIST acronym, so ASSIST, to be able to understand what you can do. So one of the things that could be helpful would be to approach the individual in a non-intrusive, compassionate, and a helpful manner. Typically, those who are approaching individuals with cameras or phones, you might want to limit that because that can be quite intrusive and people can be quite experiencing high levels of vulnerability at that point in time. So best you approach in a non-intrusive and a compassionate or helpful manner. It's almost like approaching, short of saying when we see, really just trying to make a parallel over here when you see or experience an injured animal, you try not to approach with too much of an intrusion. You try to approach really cautiously, carefully, and gently. The second thing of the acronym, which is S, would be to stabilize their emotions. So calming them in a way that, provides them some physical and emotional comfort naturally rather than forcefully. So instead of saying, I think you should calm down, it should be to talk to them about how they're feeling and let them express their emotions to the point that they feel a bit more calm rather than telling them, asking them. Also, very importantly, the next S would be to serve their needs. Meaning before approaching, I think volunteers should be quite well equipped about what are all the things that they could offer in terms of information or intervention so that when they approach these victims, they are also somewhat well aware. I know that this is a crisis. Everything's always, in many different spaces and places. However, having enough information and interventions to provide to them, to the victims as their needs are being shared could be quite valuable as well.
Bring back from OSIC right now Hital Doshi to tell us a little bit more about having access and the importance of psychological first aid during these very troubling times as well. Hital, welcome back to the show. Earlier we were talking about having access to psychological aid and how it is, of course, simple things like being videoed or taking pictures at this point of time could be a trigger. What is some of your advice to the volunteers and people reaching out to help who all have good intentions?
Thank you, Jessie, for having me back. Definitely focus on safety. So keep conversations as safe and non-provocative as possible. Promoting any kind of calm would be very valuable. Promoting connectedness is crucial. Just keeping families together if they do not want to move out of their homes right now. Try not to force them into it. Try to keep them really, really calm before influencing and negotiating. Keep their children or their loved ones close with each other. Try not to separate them because that's going to create a little bit more anguish. Also, promoting self-efficacy, meaning getting people to help themselves can be quite valuable as well. So as you're helping them, that could be valuable, but also getting them to raise their own confidence in being able to help themselves could also be quite valuable. Some of the things that would be, not very helpful would be to force people to share their stories with you as they are experiencing trauma or tragedy, especially very important or personal details.